first of all, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to understand a bit more about, and maybe start with that, more the core fundamentals or foundational ideas that you believe in from a go-to-market perspective that you've seen to work in multiple environments and multiple stages.
Great to be here. So to that question, here's the bold statement to kick off is that your sales machinery, putting that together in your go-to-market machinery, will have obviously a huge impact. But way too often, companies think that that is the answer. And way too often, they get too much credit for when things are going great and too much blame when things are going bad, more than anything. And why? The answer is very simple. It scares the shit out of you to admit that it's product market fit. Because if it's product market fit, it's, what am I going to do? How do I go raise money? What is my company worth? Do I have anything there? And so people lie to themselves, and I've seen this over and over again because it can't be product market fit. So I'm gonna swap out a new VP of sales, or let me go get a new VP of sales. Oh, that person didn't do it well enough. And there is certainly cases when you have a really good product market fit and poor execution, and you need to make those changes. They're super important. And then the flip side is also true. Great sales execution can take great product market fit and maximize value. That's what you're doing. Poor product market fit and great sales execution will lead to tremendous frustration, and good people will not continue on poor product market fit.
It's hard to point critical. Where it's not working. I think it came up yesterday about the arrow, and he says sales is the tip of the arrow.
Yeah.
And before that, you have product marketing, and you have marketing, and you have product itself, and before that, even the founder's vision, et cetera, and mission. Don't blame the tip.
Yeah.
Because it could be anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But dissecting where, is it a good product but bad sales, or is it good sales with a bad, how do you diagnose?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I've been at a lot of, Cognos, a number of places that had, really, been very blessed and fortunate to have good outcomes, but all of them are enterprise. They're all built for the enterprise market, large enterprise space. And so when looking at that in particular, and I can pivot to kind of more of that consumer, because they're very different to answer this question. In the enterprise space, I have a deep belief that if somebody isn't waking up in the morning trying to buy what you're trying to sell, it's very, very difficult. It doesn't have to be you, just to be clear, your product. But if if there isn't somebody's job that exists to solve the problem that you created your product for, I call that evangelical selling. And it's very hard. And evangelical selling is trying to convince a buyer that they have a problem they don't know they have, to take funds that they haven't allocated from something unbudgeted to direct it at this problem, which they didn't know they had to begin with. Wildly difficult.
Wildly difficult. We had Vinod Khosla. Vinod is an investor in Rubrik as well, right?
Yes.
And so he was talking about some of this yesterday.
Yeah.
But kind of taking the opposite side of what you're saying, basically saying is his biggest outcomes have come from these new categories but it is hard. It's a high risk type of bet.
It's actually a perfect example of, from an investor perspective, you want to be there because you want to be category creation, right? But from an ease of path, the reality is 95% are going to fail. So that's just the reality of it, of that. But from an investor perspective, your outsized gain comes in risk. The sure and steady is highly unlikely to have the massive outsized gains. So when I think of enterprise product market fit, I think of, hey, can I go solve a problem better than something that's there? The reality is what you start out as is not your end goal or your end game. And that's no different from Rubrik. Rubrik started out 10 years ago as a backup and recovery platform in the infrastructure space. Again, couldn't be more boring of a space. And it was like, hey, let's figure out how to disrupt the legacy environment. This goes back to that point. Legacy, you had Commvault and you had Veritas and all these like old technology, and they said, oh, we could disrupt that. But in the back of Bipple and AJ, who also founded Glean and Nitro, in the back of their mind was not building backup. It was, if we could control the data. What is backup was just an avenue to collect all the data and then build services on top. So when we built a bunch of cyber services on top in 2017, it absolutely changed the game. We became a cyber company selling cyber services, and backup and recovery was the avenue to that. And so this is kind of my point, which is easier path to find something, especially in the enterprise, that you can have strong product market fit on, but don't feel like that is all you will be or all you will become. We have a strong belief. I'm very good friends with the Wiz team. They're a customer of ours. We're a customer of them. Good partners. But that's actually an example. When I was listening to the Wiz piece, they have great product market fit, but they're still evangelical. They were going after new dollars, but it was a space that somebody had to solve for, right? And they just happened to get there quick and first.
The other thing, I guess, is it's not always like completely on this end or on that end. When that Wiz comment made, I immediately stepped over to you and said, "Hey, are they actually competing or not?"
No. Yeah.
And then you explained, and let me repeat that for the audience, because security is a very broad space and sometimes a bit complicated. But Wiz and many other companies try and avoid you being attacked. But when you are attacked, you guys look after the resilience, making sure that you have no downtime, making sure you can do data recovery, and so you're tapping into large existing security budgets.
Yes.
But you're going in with a differentiated value prop or
Yeah.
differentiated positioning. So you only have to evangelize on that part, not on the budgets.
Yeah, let me just hit this.
Right?
This is super important what you just said, and this is what I mean. Rubrik utilized backup and recovery budget. They went in and said, you have these dollars allocated. What if I could take those dollars that you're already spending for this, and on top, solve your sensitive data discovery problem, identify your blast radius of what gets hit if you have a cyber event? What if I could create automation for you to be able to come back online automatically, like an automated process, but without having to charge you extra dollars, because I'm just using your existing spend. And so it became the Trojan horse for us. We went in, we took CIO money, but the CISO went and influenced the CIO. CISO's going over, hey, I need all of these services. I can replace Varonis. I can replace this. I can replace that. And it's just a little bit of a premium on what you're already spending for this product. And that's what I mean when there was some budget that we were going after.
Yeah.
And that actually is the difference between ThoughtSpot and Rubrik. So ThoughtSpot was an awesome run, a lot of fun. When I got there, we were selling an appliance, and the first week, I was like, we can't sell an appliance.
Kill the box.
Kill the box. So we turned it into a SaaS company, and then really kind of morphed out of big data management and more into the ability to search across data wherever it exists. But the point that I was making around that is it was evangelical, and there is no real concrete end user budget. Instead, it became a religious war. And so we had this battle, and it was constant. The board talked about it was, can we replace Tableau dollars? And if you can't replace the Tableau dollars, and it's kind of like a religious event because line of business people are using that every day. Yeah. Run their reports, run their business. If that thing gets torn out and gets pulled away, somebody cares. Plumbing, super easy. You can make a change, nobody knows. The CRO, nobody's going to freak out about it, right? Unless it goes down. But you take away a tool that they use every single day, it's a very emotional experience to kind of give that up. And if you can't go take that budget, what you're essentially doing is saying, this is an additive spend on top of your budget, Mr. CIO, Mrs. CIO, and that becomes a very difficult justification unless you have very quantifiable business impact, unless you can quantify dollars out or dollars made for the end customer.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Let's change course a bit. I started off saying the different journeys you've been on, and then I also mentioned like most of the founders here are in an earlier start.
Yeah.
If you were to put yourselves in their shoes, and I'm sure at some stage you were in their shoes early on in your career, what would be the key advice you would give, specifically if you think about that, let's say 1 to 10 million journey, that moving from founder-led to like setting up your first sales engine? How do you think about like hiring in that phase, around process in that phase, about thinking about productivity, things like that?
So very different world, I think, building in ASEAN and in, whether that's India, ASEAN, ANZ, et cetera. In Silicon Valley, I find a lot of companies can get to 10 million on friends and family, and founders know their first 10 million. And by the way, I buy a lot of software. So like I'm hit up by every founder every 2 weeks. And the big mistake or challenge with that, especially in Silicon Valley, is you
false sense of security.
You basically lie to yourself to thinking this is our productivity per head. This is our, this is our average deal size. This is this is our average sales cycle length. So one of the benefits, I would say, in ASEAN and the overall region, is it's real. It's hard. You're grinding it out. That first 10 million is real deals that you're owning. I'm sure maybe some people have, a little bit of an unfair advantage to get started. But for the most part, it is real sales, real transactions, real earned revenue. And so what I would say is have some courage. If I could give, early founders any bit of advice with that is, you have to have belief, because if you invest after you see results, you miss it. You have to believe. There has to be a bit of, I'm going to invest ahead. I'm going to put my chips in. And by the way, the very notion of your ass is on the line, you're all in, it's everything or nothing, is what will help you execute to that next level. Like, you need to feel it's all there and all on the line. And so this idea of like, hey, let me hold a little back as I get started. I don't want to hire a salesperson. I don't want to hire a go-to-market person. I want to get, enough in the bank. Will kill your ability to have that, what I would call like rocket ship, which is to get you out of the orbit. You're just like everybody else until you exit the orbit. And so you need to invest ahead. I would have courage that you're working on something that matters. Certainly test that out. Certainly don't build that off of a friend and a family that says, hey, I want to buy that. But if you have a real buyer that's giving real money, and they can quantify the value to them, go dig in. Go hire the people to go take your vision and your product to the market.
And then on that hiring, because we chatted a bit about this, right? A lot of folks will look at other people with domain expertise or whatever, or think I'm going to hire exactly this group. But like, how do you think about the persona of your first hires? Do you go all in on one? Do you hire multiple and you double down?
I've been doing this for a while, this profile. I have what I call the 5 C's of what I look for in someone. And it's very different than probably anybody thinks of salespeople hiring. And the very first C is competence. I need intellectuals. And everybody probably is like, oh, yeah, that's great for your engineers. Or, hey, that's great. Like, I've heard of, but what I look for is clock speed. And what I mean by that is I want smart, intelligent, quick on their feet sellers. And it's a huge, huge need. And it's a big mistake that people make. They hire for Rolodex. They hire for, oh, this person knows this industry or knows this spot.
Or is just a smooth talker.
Or is
sales,
a smooth
right?
talker. It sounds good or looks the part. Your ability to innovate, your ability to disrupt your own business continually, change messaging, pitch, like your message is going to change a lot early on. You need people that can pick that message up, internalize it, and deliver it over and over again. So what we do is we create hiring profiles. Every company I've been in since Click, I've put this in place. What we did early on, and it has followed through, is know what we want when we are hiring. And we are very specific around profile. And the reason for that is because during an interview process, everybody sounds great, right? Like, I mean, unless they're a moron. But everybody, for the most part, knows how to interview. Who shows up and gives you
Specifically in sales, by the way.
Like, yeah, exactly. In sales, it gives you their worst up front. So the secret to interviewing is have a process. We have a very process. We identify certain criteria that we're looking for in that. Then we narrow that down. Then we look for evidence of that criteria. So competence, how do I look for evidence and competence? Am I asking for their GMAT scores or where they went to college? A little bit, sometimes we do, right? But more, the best possible evidence for intelligence is continual success selling multiple different products in different domains. If you have one person that sold one thing, hey, I sold airplanes, and they were wildly successful, that's different than, hey, I sold to line of business, I sold to CISO, I sold to CIO, I sold to database, I sold consumer, I sold price.
And I crushed it across the board.
And I crushed it at each and every one. Shows that I have the ability to understand complex things, digest it, internalize it, pivot, and sell to different buyers. That's what you want to kind of look for when you're building, kind of a go-to-market machine. The two other C's, I'll save the full 5 C's for another time. But the other one is curiosity. I always, always, always look for curious sellers. You ever have a friend that all they do is talk about themselves? They're never curious. They're not curious. They're not empathetic. They don't care about what's going on in your life. Good sellers are like detectives. They pull all the pain out from the buyer. They understand what they're going through. They're curious. You can't fake empathy. You can't fake that you care. So if you're going into a buyer with the desire, let me regurgitate everything I know that you should know, you're not going to get very far. But if you instead go in with the idea of like, I'm curious, how do you go about doing this? You build both champions and you build the ability to tie your business solution to their business pain. And then the one other C that I'd really encourage you to, you can figure ways to test on these things, but is courage. And it's hard for a seller to go belt buckle to belt buckle or eyeball to eyeball with executives that outrank them. And the idea is you want your sellers to be in a room with a CIO or a CTO or a COO or a president or masters of the universe. And I remember as a seller walking into the room and meeting with Jamie Dimon. I remember that when I was a seller and he was at JP Morgan and Guy Chiarello was the CIO. He's the president of Fiserv now. And I was a rep. And somehow I was supposed to tell them as a consultative way what they should be thinking. What kind of rep could do that unless they had courage and commitment? So if you're going to be selling and you don't want to be going to have them go sell to down the chain, you need somebody who has the ability and the courage to stand in a room and own that room, regardless of who's kind of on the other side of it, or else it won't help you scale. And what will happen is you'll end up being your best seller. And you might already be, but if you can't have them go sit in that room with the executive and it requires you to, That's where you need that. So
Yeah, no, it makes
hopefully that's helpful.
No, and I've seen that. Like, actually, we were chatting with Evan over here, who just 4 months ago hired a VP of sales, and you were talking about how he was constantly prepared, asking questions. And I was like, was he not good with ambiguity? And the answer was no, he was curious.
Yeah.
It was curiosity.
Love that.
And the first 4 months has been excellent. And in one of our companies, we had I think she was 20 years old, but she crushed it, like cold calling.
Yeah.
Like her conversion rate was like insane.
Yeah.
And 20-year-old, but like a presence and an ability to speak with executives like there's no tomorrow. And that courage that you're talking about makes complete sense. One last question. You've basically, in an interesting way, said like actually making plan is quite easy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what you said, but pretty much. If you hire fast, keep attrition down, and increase productivity per rep.
Yeah.
And my answer to that was, it's interesting, the increased productivity per rep part, like we have more and more sales tools at their disposal, and then sales leaders or founders will use the whip and have, but how do you increase that? And one of the things we talked about was things like product marketing and positioning, but also sales enablement, and how actually very few companies, at least in our part of the world, focus a lot on that and think through like, how can we make sure that that rep spends most of the time on the road, is the most effective with customers, in front of customers. What's your view on that?
Yeah, so I'll just give you a couple statistics, actually. So on average, you should be able to improve productivity 4% per quarter per head. So 16% a year of productivity is what you would hope for as a benchmark in perpetuity. No new product, nothing new in the bag. Same rep should be able to get 16% better a year. How? That's if that's what leadership does. So leadership's job and enablement's job is to make your sellers better. Now we at Rubrik, we went 40% productivity gains per year. I mean, that's how you go from 130 to 1.1 billion, is like taking the productivity per head and driving through the roof. Now what I would say is, that comes from really two things. One is product. New product to sell, new versions, good, better, best. That helps you change the average deal size. That drives productivity. So often people think productivity is in a silo, it's sales to own. You guys got to improve productivity. No, couldn't be further from the truth. To improve productivity is the game for the entire E-staff, for your entire executive staff. The primary goal you should have is increasing productivity per seller. And that means, how do I remove friction from the sales process? How do I make my product easier to demo, easier, shrink the POC process? How do I get more eyeballs or the right eyeballs so I have a better conversion? But the next big thing that you can do is invest in enablement. And we did this different, I think, than anybody. And it's now starting to happen. Greylock, our board, Greylock, Lightspeed, Bain, we have John Thompson, Mark McLaughlin, Ravi, founder of Lightspeed, Ashim from Greylock. That's our board.
Sounds like a decent board.
Yeah, they're pretty good. And they're great, actually. They're wonderful to spend time with, too. But their whole kind of like push to this when I came on board was, I laid out for them my plan. And my plan was, I need you to trust me on this because it's going to be expensive. And they said, like, what's expensive? And I said, I need to hire a head of enablement and pay them almost like a CRO. And they were like, why? And I said, because this job is really a two-person job. One runs all the operations, and one does all the training and enablement to develop all the people. And I don't want an enabler. I don't want anybody that has a career in enablement or training, because they don't have the skill sets I want. In fact, I want to go hire another CRO. And so what I did, the guy, JP Bolin, who worked for me, ran the Americas at ThoughtSpot. Before that, was the CRO of Dremio. Before that, ran the Americas for Mongo for 6 years, took them public. Very established seller. I needed somebody like that could be me in the room when I wasn't in the room, to be able to drive the execution around the enablement that we needed. So I had this vision of what we needed to do around winning stages, around the cadence of the business, establish that cadence. What did a one-on-one look like? Every one-on-one has to be the same. How do they do it? How does pipeline review happen? Everybody has to do it. So I could set this up, and then I needed an execution engine to make sure that it was happening consistently. So I would say that was one of the transformative things for us, and knowing that we were going from backup and recovery, selling to a persona that was down market, I would say mid-enterprise, and in the lower end of the IT totem pole, to moving to CISO, CIO, high up in the stack, and selling to the Cities and the Goldmans and the Apples of the world, required a heavy lift on training, enablement, and required, to my point earlier around iterations, we were going to constantly iterate and change. And so I would encourage you to have a plan for, even early days, have a plan for how do you enable your team to keep up with the pace of innovation that you want to bring to the market. That enablement person is the regulator, I would say, to your innovation. Because you can innovate all day long in product, but if it can't be digested, brought to the market, it's wasted calories.
Yeah, and I've seen that in some of our larger portfolio companies where there's all this amazing product comes out, but if sales is not buying it and if sales is not convinced, and they need to be trained and supported as well.
Great, wonderful.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
so
all.
much.